Have you seen Chuck Norris lately? He's still kicking butt and staying active well into his 80s. What's even more shocking is he looks more jacked than ever and seems to have more energy than guys half his age. And it's all thanks to Morning Kick, a revolutionary new daily drink from Roundhouse Provisions that combines ultra-potent greens like spirulina and kale with probiotics, prebiotics, collagen, and even ashwagandha. Just mix with water, stir, and enjoy. Unlike other green drinks out there, this one tastes exactly like strawberry lemonade and has hundreds of 5-star reviews. Go to roundhouseprovisions.com/save44 for up to 44% off your regular priced order. Plus, every purchase is backed by a 90-day money-back guarantee. So if you want to experience smoother digestion, a boost of energy, and just an overall healthier body, then go to roundhouseprovisions.com/save44 today. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Results can vary.
When you protect your corn and soy crops with Miravis Neem fungicide, you'll start seeing a lot more than just cleaner and greener fields. You'll get longer-lasting disease control, better plant health benefits, less plant stress, higher potential yield, and increased ROI potential. Ask your Syngenta retailer about Miravis Neo and start seeing more green in your fields, on your yield monitor, and in your wallet. Always read and follow label instructions.
The 3 Down Greencast is brought to you by the Pile of Bones Brewing Company. Home delivery now available in Regina and Saskatoon at saskbeerdelivery.ca. Welcome to the 3 Down Greencast, the internet's only Chris Cuthbert appreciation podcast. Joel Gasson, as always, with John Fraser. And you've obviously heard the news at this point. Everyone has. That longtime CFL on TSN and TSN hockey play-by-play guy, Chris Cuthbert, has decided to switch sides and go to Sportsnet, which a big move in this country. A lot of guys, a lot of the top guys in this country rarely flop networks. And I'm not going to lie, when I saw that, I was on break on whatever day that happened, last week, Friday, I think it was. And I saw the tweet right away from Sportsnet PR, and my first reaction was, holy shit. Because, as I said, this doesn't happen that often in this country. With talent of that caliber, they tend to stick around. Networks do what they can to keep them. And I'm sure TSN did, and we'll get into the reasonings why and everything in a minute. And why, I don't begrudge Cuthbert for making that move whatsoever. But now the idea is, the conversation is, what is the CFL on TSN going to do to replace him? I wrote the piece on 3downnation.com over the weekend for what I think the CFL on TSN should do or could do. We're going to get into that in actual detail. But as you know, we like to embrace the dumb around here.
We love embracing the dumb. That's basically the tagline of the 3 Down Nation Greencast.
Yes, one of them. And it was brought to my attention originally by someone on Twitter who suggested, and apparently John is claiming he had this idea before that tweet came to me, but I am skeptical about that.
I was saving... I was... Why? Because it was actually a good idea and actually hilarious, so... Okay, yeah. I understand your skepticism, but I swear to the flying spaghetti monster, Joel, that I saw that tweet on Twitter, and I'm like, that was going to be my idea. It was going to be cold open. I was going to hit you with it. We were going to laugh. I'd feel like a genius. And then more proof that there are people smarter than me online. Just come out and say it to you.
Yes. So his idea, and allegedly John's idea, was that we have a reality show contest to replace Chris Cuthbert.
Yes!
And I thought, why not? So I originally started thinking names, right? So you think you can call a football game.
Right.
Or the Canadian Football Idol. Or
ooh, I like that.
The Football Voice.
Ooh.
Right?
I've got one for you, too.
Mm-hmm.
Can you suck less than Rod Black?
It's a little mean, but okay.
And this is exactly the reason why when people come out and say, John, you sharpen up your demo tape. You should know. This is exactly the reason why I won't get the job, is because I will stand here and say I've played the Rod Black drinking game, and I have muted him on more than one occasion to listen to local feeds of anybody else.
And I mean, logistical reasons. Part of the reason you left radio was the travel lesson. I mean, that whole thing.
The whole family thing, the money thing. I love my job. All that kind of stuff. So,
well, I assume being the lead man on the CFL and TSN would probably pay better than local radio in Saskatoon.
I can tell you that. I'm trying to think how I can say this without breaking the law. I can tell you that most jobs that I see credit applications for pay better than local radio in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan.
Or maybe they just didn't like you, so they didn't pay you.
That's also fair. And, well, I didn't really like them either, so I guess the feeling is mutual. Which is why I sit in a basement and record a podcast with one of my very best friends rather than talk professionally on the radio these days.
Yeah, so absolutely. So, of course, we wish Chris the best. We're going to get into it in a second here. We're also going to discuss the decision announced now that USports across the country from now until basically January, other than Quebec officially, has been shut down. I don't know if Quebec has different powers and that ability. Whatever the case is there, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up following in line. But for now, yeah, Canada West, Ontario, and the Atlantic, nothing. They said originally, I thought I heard team sports, but it seems like just everything's basically done. Also, a lot of reasons why into that. Yes, it seems like things are getting safer, and there really isn't, in theory, a reason why these teams and events can't go on, but there are a lot of other logistical reasons behind the scenes as to why this decision had to be made now. So,
money.
That's the Cliff Notes. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.
All right, bye.
But as usual, before we get into all of that, John, I hear there's a change. What's in the glass this week?
Well, in going back in the glass this week, it's not a dramatic change.
What's new is old again? Is that?
It basically. Well, I tried to be new. I wanted to try the lime hibiscus beer from Pile of Bones, our great sponsor. You told me about it. I love fruity beers, and it was literally one of those. I went, how on earth have I not tried this? So today, I went to the, as Max calls it, the liquid store.
I mean, he's not wrong.
I kind of like it. I mean, it is a store for it's almost exclusively liquid.
Now you're like, can you change it? You're like, can you change it to that on the credit card statement so it looks like I didn't go to the liquor store?
Right, and I tell you what, Joel. As my quarantine comes to an end, as I return to work next Tuesday, please everybody buy a Nissan. I can tell you,
or just go to CU for a bunch of warranties. You don't necessarily have to buy the car, I guess.
That's fair. Just buy a Nissan anywhere. Come buy a warranty from me. So I went to the liquid store and didn't have to tap the card. I definitely needed to put the pin in on that one because, So after spending way too much at the liquid store, I tried to get the lime hibiscus Pile of Bones. It was completely sold out.
Tis the
Pile
season,
of Bones. So. Exactly. 'Tis the season. Pile of Bones actually on sale at Sobeys Liquor in Saskatoon. So it's I think I was a couple bucks off, so I was all over it. So what did I do? I looked at our great sponsors' beers and I went, you know what? I've been drinking less beer lately. Let's go back to the old mainstay. It is the official beer. Can we call it the official beer of the Greencast?
I think it is. I mean, it's at least your official beer.
Okay. The official beer of one half of the Greencast. Pile of Bones White IPA. Perfect for summer. It is summer. I have been wearing shorts every day since March the 15th. I have to start wearing pants next week, so I'm going to enjoy my summer beer and my time in shorts.
Absolutely. So I do have one hibiscus lime gozo left in the fridge. And I thought about drinking it just to make you jealous because I knew you couldn't find any.
Fair enough.
But then I didn't because I wasn't really...
You're a good man.
Not for that reason. Not because I felt like being nice to you. I don't know. I just wasn't craving it for some reason. I don't know. I guess we just got back from a walk with the dog. It's a little windy and chilly today.
Right.
So I also stuck with our sponsors, quickly becoming one of my favorites from them. Maybe my go-to as well with them now, the Space Cadet IPA.
Oh, yes. Also very, very good.
I think I've had that one the last few times. At least 2 of the last 4, maybe 2 of the last 5 times. 3 of the last 5, maybe, on this program.
You know what? We should almost, and it's funny that we're now entering the technically third season of this program.
Mm-hmm.
Which
is shocking.
Right?
Surely someone would have told us to stop by now.
Right? But yet we still get like information given, especially like we still get information given to us, on the basis of having a podcast. Like I've got information when we talk about the CJFL season that I received from sources. That's what we call in the business a tease. But another amazing thing, how in the hell did we never track what's in the glass for every single week? Like, I feel like we missed the glorious opportunity to have like a standings board.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's the 17th week that it's the Pile of Bones White IPA, or, John and his homemade pink vodka drink for a 17th week in a row.
Yeah. No, that would be some hashtag fancy stats.
That would be advanced analytics, but
that would be some stats that it would enrage the 200 hockey men. Throwback reference there.
Don't forget the old sportscasters too.
Yeah,
the old sportscasters hate that stuff. Okay? From now on, we're just going to go off the eye test because old hockey guys love the eye test.
Yeah.
And the eye test says we drink a shitload of white IPA and a shitload of Space Cadet.
I mean, it would bear to reason that overall there would be more Pile of Bones consumed on this podcast than anything else, considering they do give us beer to say their name on this podcast.
And they give us actually a shitload of beer to say our names on their names on this podcast, and it is appreciated every single time.
Especially yes, and a quick plug for our sponsors, because Phase 3 of the relaunch of Saskatchewan, whatever you want to call it, is on. We're recording this on Monday. As of Tuesday, tap room's open again with 50% capacity, so I imagine it's going to be difficult to get in for a while because people are going to be itching to go, and it was difficult enough to get in there beforehand. With about half the spaces there was before, I imagine it's only going to get more difficult. But if you can swing by to support those guys, because I know everyone in the industry across the board has been hurting, please do. So please support your local tap room no matter where it may be right now.
Well, and two things. One, I went out to go to the liquor store tonight. I also stopped by to get some ice cream. I noticed a lot of local joints here in Saskatoon. Parking lots were full. Obviously, I was talking to a friend of mine. She went to the Yard and Flagon today, popular place in Saskatoon. Said it was awesome. People are patient. Service is great. Like, people are just thrilled to be able to get out. And two, the Regina, and they do a bit of it up here in Saskatoon as well too, but the brotherhood of the Regina beer community, of the local community, it just blows me away. You see,
this is what happens when of the three major breweries in this town, the three of them are good friends from the Regina Ales Club. So
well, and that's exactly it. And you can tell it. I mean, the number one thing I saw on social media today, not only from Market Rebellion, I believe I saw it from Pile of Bones as well, was just the new map that they have that basically shows, hey, in an hour and a half, if you walk or stumble, you can visit every brewery in Regina.
Yeah, and I believe the walk, they took you around through downtown too to stop at some bars there too that actually support local as well.
Exactly. Like to me, I saw that and went, I'm like, okay, I need to, as most of my vacation plans have now been kiboshed, I'm like, you know what? When I'm allowed to, I need to come down and see you and just try that. Like, that's just that to me just looks like an awesome, amazing time.
We're probably not going to walk. I'm going to tell you that much.
That's fair.
We could easily do the Rebellion, Bushwhacker, and District if we really wanted to go, and Warehouse. They're all kind of in that same area, but Pile of Bones is a little bit out there, and Malty's even further away. So
yeah, I saw Malty's like the one I feel like you start at Malty when you still have you're still full of piss and vinegar.
Yeah.
And then you just kind of pass out a Pile of Bones because you're like, the journey's over. Give me the double IPAs. I need to get zesty. That's how I do it, at least.
Yeah, I mean, that is how you would do it. So, I mean.
Now, who are we kidding? I'd be shit-faced by the third stop. I don't drink slowly.
No, we know.
That's fair.
So the guy now, I guess, technically making his third stop would be Chris Cuthbert.
Yes.
He was with CBC, then TSN. Now he is with Sportsnet. You didn't think I was going to pull that one out, did you?
I am impressed. You know what? The number of times that you find a transition off the dumb shit I say is spectacular.
We all have our talents in life. I should put that one on my resume.
You can somehow change John's gibberish into a smooth transition to topics.
And we plan. I can pull back the curtain. We plan none of this.
Oh, absolutely.
There are some podcasts out there, some shows out there where they go over all that kind of stuff throughout the entire show, like kind of map out exactly what they're going to do. We have a very loose idea,
yes,
of what we're going to talk about, and then we just kind of go off the rails like right away.
Yeah, we know what we're drinking. We know what the cold open's going to be. We know what our topics we're going to be covered, and pitter patter, away we go.
And then we fill in the gap from there.
That's right.
Yeah. Chris Cuthbert, now a member of the NHL on Sportsnet, and if you read the piece with Dan Barnes on Post Media, and then he was on the Sports Cage on Monday as well, the logic that Chris Cuthbert lays out as to why he made this decision, one that he admits was a difficult one, because TSN was very good to him. They hired him very quickly at a time when he was laid off at CBC, when things were kind of tough there, and the NHL lockout was on, and the whole thing, that whole rigmarole that went on there. And, Chris is just one of those guys. He's one of those stand-up guys. There's a lot of people in his position across the world, across this continent, that when you kind of become top-end play-by-play guys, the ego kind of kicks them a little bit.
Right, yes.
Chris is not one of those guys. Every encounter I've had with Chris has been incredibly professional, incredibly amazing. Obviously, I haven't seen him much in the last few years, but I was on the beat every day. Back in my old life, we interacted fairly frequently whenever he was in Regina. And I remember even being impressed in Grey Cups. I hadn't seen him in 2 or 3 years, and he still remembered who I was. So I think, he's just a great dude, and we obviously wish him nothing but the best there. And he came out and he said it. He's like, I'm 62, not getting any younger. There's 6 years left for the NHL on Sportsnet. So by that logic, he's 68 when the rights are up. And that's if Bell's even able to secure the rights. There's no guarantees there that that's going to happen. And he said, basically he wants to call a Stanley Cup final. And that's the only thing that he hasn't done. He's called, dozens of Grey Cups. He's called the Olympic. He's called the Golden Goal, the biggest goal in Canadian hockey history. He called it. And this is all that's left. And for some people, that might be weird to think, because, we're football people, we love football, but in this country still, in terms of sporting events, the Stanley Cup is the pinnacle, basically, of professional sports in this country. The Grey Cup draws higher ratings overall compared to the Stanley Cup final, but that's 7 games versus 1, more of a TV event versus a sporting event, that whole kind of thing. So if you're in this country and you are an aspiring play-by-play guy, for the most part, unless you really hate hockey, which Chris doesn't, he loves hockey, you aspire to call the Stanley Cup. And he told Derek Taylor on the Sports Cage on Monday that it sounds like Sportsnet has essentially guaranteed him that he's going to call a Stanley Cup final. Which is
unreal.
So for Chris, absolutely, that's great. It's amazing. I respect his decision, because at a certain point, he can see the writing on the wall. He can see there's more runway behind him than ahead of him. So why not chase your dream when you have the chance?
You're exactly right with that, Joel. And I think, too, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I think DT, our good friend, he may have tweeted that it'll be this year's Stanley Cup final if there is one.
Yeah,
thrown him right into it.
Yeah.
Which
I kind of wonder how Jim Houston feels about that, but
on the same note, if okay, and
I'm sure publicly he'll say all the right things and all that all fast, but deep down.
But on the same note too, I mean, Jim Houston is younger than Chris Cuthbert.
Yeah.
And if you get the 2 of the very top play-by-play commentators in the entire country both under your roster, I'd have a hard time thinking that they didn't go to Jim at some point and say, okay, Jim, and I know the respect that broadcasters have amongst each other. And that goes at any level. If you're a play-by-play guy, there's this crazy amount of respect between all of them, and I've been a play-by-play guy. You've spoken to each other. I wouldn't be surprised if Jim had no problem I don't know Jim from a hole in the ground, but knowing the culture of play-by-play guys and how highly regarded Chris Cuthbert is, I would not be surprised if Jim Houston just said, all right, he's got the next 6. I'll take it after that.
Maybe, who knows?
Right.
But I mean, it's not like Jim really has a great option otherwise.
No, exactly.
Like if he obviously he would want to stay on that stage, so it's not like he's going to suddenly bolt and go to TSN and then do regional Leafs games,
regional Ottawa games, or have to. And I think this is the other part is people, coming from a guy that quit that business because of travel and time away from home, and I mean, at Chris's level, money is not an issue. No, God no. But right now, the life of Chris Cuthbert is he works 2 CFL games all summer. Mm-hmm. He then works some regional TSN games.
Yeah, him and Gord Miller basically more or less split the regional Leafs and Sens games.
Exactly.
Which is a lot more travel than national, because you're going all over the continent all freaking year.
Well, and combine that with him and Gord Miller are both also still working for NBC to essentially giving themselves a whole paycheck.
Yeah.
So you're going from a world, and people that don't know are going to say, well, he just shows up and puts on a game.
I can tell you this: he is one of the most prepared broadcasters you'll ever see. His game notes for football games are insane.
There's a sheet that he's tweeted out before. Mm-hmm. It looks like a depth chart, and he's got highlighter all over the place, and he's got numbers and stats, and he's got all that. In the business, we call it the Cuthbert sheet.
Yeah.
Chris has shared it with everybody. That's another thing. I have Cuthbert sheets from when I used to work CJFL games, and the amount of work that would go in for doing 2 games, and the amount of research that he does, and the
fact that, I mean, in a real world, you would only have to do 1 game a week. There should be no scenario where you should be doing 2 football games within a 2 or 3 day span.
Exactly.
That should not be happening. Like the top guys, other than Joe Buck now, because Fox has Thursday nights, all the other top guys in the NFL do 1 game. Everyone in the NFL basically does 1 game a week. You have an entire week to prepare for 1 game. The guys in the CFL and TSN, they just make them prepare for 2 games. Which is
like, I can tell you, your broadcast is so much better when you're doing 1. You get a chance to actually talk to some players and get some players open up to you, and you become familiar with them. And that's what those little tidbits of, the CFL's got some absolutely fantastic PR people, and the CFL, I haven't worked a CFL game in a while, but I can tell you the stats packages they used to give, and this was the same for USports. You'd get these great stats packages that broke everything down. You get those fun little tidbits you could drop on air, but a lot of it was just you just get it from talking to the players. And we were preparing for 2 games. You don't get that. So this was Cuthbert was basically working in an entire year at 62 years old. Mm-hmm. Now he gets to go to Sportsnet, where you'd have to think he's not going to be doing any regional stuff.
I don't know. They got the regional guys are basically all out west, so that wouldn't make any sense.
Exactly. So, minus maybe filling in for a sick day or vacation, Chris Cuthbert has gone from, having to work 2 games in a weekend and work the entire year and work with 2 different networks and different contracts and the border and blah, blah, blah.
Well, not to mention, like, during September in preseason, October and November, on top of doing CFL games a week, he'd be doing some hockey games during the week too.
Which is it's the fact that he was able to call those all at such a high level it's just a testament to what he can do. So he's probably making, I would guess, at least the same amount of money to now call games on either Saturday, Sunday, or Wednesday nights.
Saturday's probably for sure is somewhere along the slate.
Right. Yes, he'll be on Saturdays,
and then sprinkled throughout. Otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Depending on whether they're doing hometown hockey, the Wednesday nights, and like it's between having like your top 2 guys being Jim Houston and Chris Cuthbert. Talk about an eargasm, man! Like holy shit! Like that is just like Saturday nights are just gonna like. I'm just gonna put on hockey on Saturdays just like for background noise because both those guys are that good.
I'm not a big Jim Houston guy, but Chris Cuthbert for sure, definitely. So
I like Jim.
He's fine. I don't hate him, but he's not really my style. He's not. I think he's okay. He's not great. That's just my opinion. Like I get why people like him. I'm not saying he's bad, but I don't know.
That's right.
So the question now becomes, where does TSN go from here? Because naturally, this is a huge loss for them.
Massive.
because for not only just CFL and TSN, but just in general for the number of hats that he wears throughout the course of a year. Mm-hmm. And so where do they go? And I think I wrote the piece. You may or may not have read it on 3downnation.com.
I did, yeah. I'm such a nerd when it comes to this stuff.
I was talking to the audience, not you. I know you read it.
That's fair.
If you like something I post, then I knew you read it. So,
you mean, in fairness, I do just like basically auto like everything you post, but I do always read it as well. Most of the time on the can or while being tackled by kids, but I still read it.
Yeah. So I think the most likely outcome, because I don't imagine, especially the way the world economy has gone the last while, there hasn't exactly been a butt ton of money spent on advertising, especially in the sports world for the last few months. I don't feel like Bell's really going to want to be in a position to spend money to poach someone. So the likeliest outcome, I think, is they're going to move from within. And
I would say for this year.
Yeah. So I think there's kind of a short-term move that they can make internally to eventually springboard someone up. Because I don't think there is currently someone on their sort of roster, so to speak, that currently sits that is like the heir apparent, definite guy to take over.
I would agree.
They brought in Dustin Nielsen last year. He started doing some games. He might get there. I don't know. There's a possibility. Like, he could certainly ascend to that level. He's young enough. He's got time. I just don't think he quite has the profile yet to suddenly, all of a sudden, call a Grey Cup this year.
No,
should there be a Grey Cup.
You're absolutely
And that's no offense to the guy whatsoever. I know he's a quality broadcaster, the whole thing. I'm not saying anything against him. As I said in the piece, there would probably be a quasi-revolt should Rod Black be calling the Grey Cup on television this year.
Absolutely.
as much as that would make me laugh just to see the tweets.
It would be a firestorm, and I think, and I hate to and I hate hammering on him because from all accounts, Rod Black,
one of the greatest dudes apparently. I've never actually met him, but apparently just a phenomenal human being.
Exactly, but on the same note, like, I listened to him on the Jay and Dan podcast once, and I went in with an open mind. I remember listening to that. I'm like, okay, I've heard all this great stuff about him. Maybe he's super chill. Maybe he's this, and he came still across very Rod Blackish, and that's why I don't feel as bad about being such an asshole to him. Especially, like, let's face it, Sam Hurl's gone from the Riders now, so I got to find somebody to be my new whipping boy. So Rod Black it is.
Actual football news, check mark. There we go. Sam Hurl retired. There we go.
Woohoo! We got it. But I almost think the viewership would drop. I think you would have people not watch the Grey Cup game because Rod Black is calling it, and it might be a small number of people, but I think you'd still have people doing that.
I will still always maintain what I've said about Rod Black for the last while now. He's a good guy, just put in the wrong position by his employer. Because I think if you watch him in the host role on the Raptors games on TSN...
Oh, he's very good.
He's good at that.
He's very good at that.
He's just not a football play-by-play announcer.
No.
And he's not the first guy to get miscast in this country either. There's a guy that I think that TSN could look at that had that happen to him at one point in his career as well. So...
Yeah. And we'll get to that in a moment. Oh, I'm excited.
So ultimately, if we're looking internally, I think, okay, you kind of continue to, because Dustin Nielsen has told Post Media that he's been told he's going to get more games this year. That's not surprising.
Which is awesome. Absolutely. Yeah. I think you're right in terms of profile. In terms of a broadcasting nerd, listening to Dustin's call, Dustin has the fundamentals. He's been doing USports football. He loves football. He's worked some sidelines. It seems like he has good relationship with people. I love him on social media. Haven't listened to his show a lot, but from a fundamental standpoint, very good at his call. Like, he covers what you need to be done, and he does it well. You're right. He still needs time to grow his profile, though.
Yeah, and he's kind of younger, new school along that line that I think that the broadcast as a whole could kind of use that boost up just about everywhere.
100%.
Like it or not, Rod Black's not going anywhere. So I think the solution for now is you move Rod Smith out of the big chair in the host position, put him in a play-by-play spot, and I've heard he's maybe not the most keen on traveling, but then this kind of brings up the issue we talked about earlier of these guys working multiple games a week, where it's like, okay, now you say Smith is your number one guy, you have him with someone, Dwayne Ford or whoever because I think there's an opportunity here to reevaluate your color commentators as well.
Agreed.
And so you have your number one crew with Smith and whoever they decide to do there, and maybe they only work one game a week, and then that gives that game of the week type feel versus, well, they're both doing 2 games, so really, which is the biggest? I don't know. Now for sure, okay, this week Calgary's playing Saskatchewan, Rod Smith on the call. You're like, oh boy, here we go.
Right, exactly.
That's kind of part of what you can do to make certain games feel more important than others.
Well, it's the same thing that Fox does with Joe Buck.
Yeah.
America's game of the week, they always call it, right? You watch on Fox, it's got Joe
CBS
Buck.
has Jim Nantz. They all have their guys, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I absolutely agree with that. And I would argue, and you mentioned it in your piece too, that we don't have a Cuthbert heir apparent, but we do have a Rod Smith heir apparent. Yes. In Kate Burness.
Yeah, she's already done Thursday Night Football. I think she's a phenomenal host. I think the panel could use a female voice.
Absolutely, especially one that's as knowledgeable and talented as her.
Yeah, whether it's her or it's Natasha Stanisevski, there's someone out there in their land that could do this. That can kind of bring up and bring down the average age of the panel.
Well,
to be perfectly honest,
exactly it. And I know I saw on Twitter a bit people wanting to see Kate elevated to the play-by-play role. Mm-hmm. And I don't know Kate's background. If she's got some play-by-play experience and she's got good, hell, I'd love to see it.
Yeah.
But I can tell you as a broadcaster, and you can vouch for this, sure, as well, Joel, through your experience, that play-by-play is such a different animal that you could have the most talented host, reporter, anchor in the universe.
Yeah.
Put him in play-by-play chair. And I'm not saying that this would be the case with Kate, but I just know there's a lot of guys that play-by-play is a totally different animal. And sometimes it doesn't fit. It doesn't.
And play-by-play at different levels is a different animal too, as we've seen like on ESPN in different spots where they've promoted college guys to the NFL and it just doesn't work.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Like it's crazy. Like I've worked everything from I've done midget AAA hockey games to professional lacrosse. Like there's so many changes at every single level you move up, and so much more preparation and things like that. So, if I don't know Kate's play-by-play skills, if Kate kicks ass at play-by-play, then I'm
100%. I'm all for it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm 100% on Beth Moen should be calling Monday Night Football bandwagon as well. So let's just clear that air too. I don't know if such personality exists in this country, and I don't think that's not a slight against any of the female broadcasters in this country, because I think they all do a phenomenal job. Sarah Oleski is one of the best reporters in the country, and should have a bigger role in CFL and TSN even. I think it's an indictment on the system and how it's developed and how it is still an old boys club that's hard to crack into.
No, you are absolutely bang on with that, Gas. You're absolutely right. So, back to the Smith point.
Yeah.
I'm the same. I've heard he doesn't. The thought of traveling across the country to work 2 different games in a weekend doesn't appeal to him. I think your solution
you might be able to convince him to do once a week for you. You could center it, a lot of it probably more east, occasionally out west, and then it's not a whole year of travel, right?
Exactly. You're looking at a summer. You could still do Hamilton and Ottawa and Montreal are all going to be relevant whenever CFL football returns. Send them out to Saskatchewan for Labor Day, to Winnipeg for the Banjo Bowl, right? Like, yeah, you could mostly keep it within the same time zone. So, I would love to see Rod Smith call the Grey Cup next year.
Yeah. So that's if you're going internally. Now, if there is a chance that either they find money in the budget to go external, or they start getting some phone calls from external candidates. There are some out there, and I put some in the piece. And for me, if money was no object and circumstance and everything was not an object, then I think the guy that I would want in the role would be Sportsnet's Tim McAuliffe.
1,000,000%. Yes.
The guy breathes Canadian sport in general, basically. Like, he loves all of the USports. He's really into Canadian football. He's on Sportsnet, he doesn't hide that fact. And they let him get away with it, which tells you all you really need to know.
Yeah.
And he would be great. And if they were able to get him to come back on board, you could reunite him with Dwayne Ford, like when they used to call the old CIS games.
Yeah.
And I think that would just take the broadcast to another level. I would be surprised if Rogers didn't do all they could to keep him, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he would listen if Bell were to call.
Well, and I think, too, if you're Bell, you have Tim and Sid, who are now probably their most popular radio product now that Bob McCowan is gone.
I mean, they were probably more popular before that. Like Bob was hard on the way out.
I think that's a big reason they got moved to TV only. They're back on TV and radio. If you've watched McAuliffe call any kind of university sports,
well, he was doing a lot. He was doing one of the national semifinals in the Vanier for the last number of years.
They were so good.
Yeah.
He, like, again, me as a broadcasting nerd, like, that is just like, it floors me that he's not doing more play-by-play. It was interesting because he did openly muse while talking to Chris Cuthbert his desire to have the CFL on Sportsnet.
Who would have ever suggested that they should be on multiple networks? I mean, who would ever suggest such a thing?
I don't know what kind of a weird take that would be. I said it. It must be wrong, though. So
it's not like I've written basically an entire piece saying that before. Like, no,
it's fair, and it's a very well written piece. Tim, and the thing is too, I think Tim fits the mold in a couple of ways. Mm-hmm. I have not personally met Tim. I've always wanted to. I've been a huge fan of his since for years. Friends of mine in the USports community that have met him, he's attended, like, when he does a Vanier, he doesn't just sit in his hotel room and go out and meet with old buddies. He's at the awards ceremonies. He's talking to sports information directors. He's talking to these people, and they've all told me he's just like a genuine dude with a genuine love and passion of it. And somebody with that knowledge of USports is what I think is the only thing that the CFL broadcasts are missing. You know, you can say the guys from Queens, but
well, I mean, Dwayne Ford's there too, but yeah.
But I mean, even Dwayne's got a full-time job as a labor lawyer.
Yeah.
Like, Dwayne is covering the league and covers it well. He covers the sports well, but I think you need another guy in there that can just talk more about the fact that, oh yeah, that's Rob Bagg, he played at Queens, and if your number one guy has that knowledge, I think it helps grow the Canadian game. Plus, if you're Bell, you're all of a sudden stealing, you know, one of the most popular personalities that's basically on two platforms in radio and TV. Mm-hmm. And on top of that...
Well, I mean, if we really want to really dig deep here and really have people stop listening to this podcast, we can dig really deep here. And it was just recently that TSN 1050, their afternoon drive show, Overdrive, for the first time ever, surpassed Sportsnet 590, The Fan, in the afternoon drive slot, ratings-wise.
Right.
So... Right. And so, in return, Sportsnet moved Tim and Sid in there to try and grab that spot back. I haven't heard if that's worked yet or not. But if all of a sudden you're ripping Tim out of there, you're throwing a wrench into what Rogers had planned.
Well, and now all of a sudden you've got a guy that if you've watched Tim and Sid and you've watched Tim McAuliffe, like, he loves basketball too.
Yeah.
You know, he loves Canadian football. He loves basketball. Now you've got a guy that can do your basketball stuff. And to me, now you've got a guy that... No offense to anybody else that's filled in on Jay and Dan, they don't seem to get that same free flow, free conversation interviewer skill, right? Like I'm also a fan of Jay and Dan. I've met them personally. I like what they do. I like what their show is all about, but it's just you're to a degree you're putting a square peg in a round hole because it's so different than everything else you're asking other people to do. Mm-hmm. But yet it's so similar to what Tim's been doing with Sid for all these years.
Yeah.
So now you've got a guy that could be your number one CFL play-by-play guy, could work your winters doing basketball, and fill in on your premier Sports Center show. All while taking maybe the number one personality from your competitor. So you're right. In a dream scenario, as a football fan, Tim McAuliffe's my pick. Like, I'd love to see him on CFL games. Like, and who knows if that could lead to more exposure for university football. I know he pushes for that very actively, even with the bigwigs at Sportsnet. So, yeah, if money's no object, I think he's your guy.
Yeah, so that would be the guy that I would get to, and maybe he would listen if Bell called. Who knows? Because, I mean, he's in a good spot, but like Chris Cuthbert, at some point, you want to follow your dream. And based on everything I know about, like you, I don't know the guy. I know people that know him, and it wouldn't surprise me if, like Chris Cuthbert calling the Stanley Cup final, wouldn't surprise me if Tim McAuliffe would love to call the Grey Cup.
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, he is the former play-by-play voice of the Hamilton Tiger Cats.
Yeah.
So
that's where I would go number one.
Yeah.
Pie in the sky. We'll see. There are some other options out there as well because Chris Cuthbert went to Sportsnet and is going to be taking on a very heavy hockey role there. Could there be an opportunity for the former host of the CFL on TSN to return to TSN?
In Dave Randorf.
Theoretically, sure. I don't know. I don't know what his contract looks like. I don't know how he feels about where he's on the depth chart now. Personally, I actually really like his hockey call.
So do I.
So in my opinion, he's been my favorite play-by-play guy that they've had there until Chris Cuthbert signed.
Right.
So that's kind of where I sit on that. But you could return him in if he's potentially interested. You could bring him back in either A, his old role, or B, maybe he moves into the play-by-play booth. I don't know. Slight option there.
Well, speaking of following dreams, that's the big reason he went to Sportsnet is because he wanted to be a play-by-play guy, right?
And that's kind of the reason why I don't really foresee it happening. Is maybe he's happy kind of even in the hockey role he's in just because he's doing what he loves to do. I don't know.
Right.
So the other option is a guy that's worked with the boss of 3 Down Nation, the guy that's maybe been miscast a little bit in his life, and that would be former CBC commentator Mark Lee. And I say miscast because there was a time, I don't know if you remember, where Mark Lee did the late games on Hockey Night in Canada.
Yes, I do remember that. Yes, because
he was not good at that.
No,
he's great at amateur sports. He's great at football. He is not an NHL commentator.
no, and that was made clear very quickly. He's the kind of guy you want calling a 100-meter sprint. And I remember. He often ended up muted during my younger days in Northern Ontario, but that was largely because we were getting ready to party or go to the bar or something like that, right? So, but less on his play-by-play skill, but yeah, a little bit of a miscast there, but again, I think he'd do a good job. And I'm gonna throw another name out there while we're spitballing because again, I want a guy that knows the game and loves the game and has a good call. Current president of Football Canada, Jim Mullen.
See, I've heard his name bandied about. I just didn't know his play-by-play background is all.
I've never worked directly with him, but he worked as soon as they started the Canada. He's a big proponent, along with Dave Dubé and several others, of making a national, making USports national with the Elite Eight conference and getting it on TSN, and they were all part of that big push.
Well, I mean, he should 100% be part of the broadcast in some way or form or another. There's no question about that.
Well, the fact he wasn't on the draft was bullshit.
Yeah, I think we said that on this podcast after the draft, even.
Yeah, we did. I just want to reiterate it, but his football call is very, very good. He's worked some Canada West Showcase games. Before that, he was working with Shaw and stuff like that. He's well versed. He does his research. He knows how to call a game, and he knows how to bring the best out of his whole crew. So I think Jim Mullen. I could envision Jim in taking you couldn't elevate him to Chris Cuthbert tomorrow.
No,
but I could definitely see Jim's the kind of guy that they should be okay, Jim, here's some money. You're going to call 4 games a year, right? He's a guy that should be involved in some way. I know we're talking Cuthbert replacements, but I think Jim should be get way more exposure on a national level.
Fair enough. Yeah, certainly an option there too. Speaking of USports, the decision has been rendered down now that basically there isn't going to be any for the foreseeable future to the end of 2020. Basically everything wiped off the board today except for Quebec at this point,
right?
As they may or may not play. I'm going to guess eventually Quebec's going to cancel, but at this point, Atlantic Canada, Ontario, and the West all saying, nope, no sports this year, and that includes football. And There's been a lot of discussions about, is this the right decision, and the timing of it, and the whole shebang, because everyone's like, oh, things in the West are going well, why can't Canada West go? Well, sure, in terms of health and safety, maybe you could have some kind of competition. Right. I don't know if you could have a season per se, because there's still questions about traveling. But regardless, in theory, you could probably get away with some kind of thing. But ultimately, really, this is a money play at this point.
Yeah.
COVID has hit everything hard. Universities are hard up right now. A lot of these sports run on a lot of donations from, from people, from communities, especially, rich guys who, want to help out their sports. And priorities from donors are probably going somewhere else right now. And it takes, we're looking as, we're just a couple of months from football camp starting. So this is the time where you're really getting into budgets and semantics and figuring things out. And the money isn't there to do it, frankly.
No. And I was surprised that the OUA and AUS canceled at the same time as Canada West. Because
it's probably a sign of solidarity to make it not seem kind of like a patchwork thing where they all kind of said, you know what, for everyone's sake, let's just do this at once so it looks like a unified front on this.
I would agree because we were going to record last night and I did a whole bunch of research. So apparently when I do research, things happen and we have to push it back. But the operating cost, and you're right, Joel, it's all coming down to money out here in Western Canada.
Yeah.
It's the fact is that Canada West is such a large conference and the costs of, like if you're playing a game, if you're going even Saskatoon to Edmonton, you've got 2 buses full of athletes for a football game, athletes, coaches, support staff. You now have hotels, you now have meals, you now have the game to play, and then you have to come back, right? It's... that is not cheap. It's not like it's not like the CJFL where you're just taking a bus from Saskatoon to Regina and coming back the very next day, possibly with a couple cases of beer because you won. Well, you never got beer if you lost, but if you won, right? So I think the biggest deciding factor this year is the sponsorship dollars, and you have to rely on ticket revenue and things like that. And even if they were allowed to play, there was not going to be any fans there.
Yeah.
So to me, that's what it comes down to. I'm glad the conferences have a united front, and it's unfortunate. I love USports football, but it does look, at least from the Canada West release today, I know some people were on Twitter were musing about, well, I hope these 5th-year players, still have a chance. They still have, they're being robbed. Well, it looks like that, at least from the tweet from Canada West, that they will maintain, from what I interpret, it looks like they will maintain their eligibility whenever, next season's able to roll around. So that, to me, is a massive plus.
Yeah, and so there's lots of things that need to be figured out here before we get too ahead of what may or may not be happening with this whole thing. So I think at this point, it's too early to panic about what this means for players and everything. There's obviously a ripple effect in terms of how this is going to affect the CFL going forward in terms of the draft, right. But that's a question for another day at this point, I think. And on top of the money, too, it's such a different atmosphere, such a different world in the world of academia versus other kinds of sport, because there's liability issues with the school. And there's even just semantics at play here. There's all the way it looks, because there's going to be so many students that aren't even going to be in actual classrooms this year. There's going to be all kinds of students that don't travel to Regina to come to the University of Regina to take their classes. They're just going to stay at home in Vancouver and do it online.
Right.
So to force the football players to come in would be weird, frankly. So there's a lot of that kind of politics at play too. So there's a lot of reasons why they will be able to go. They weren't really able to go forward this year, and that applies to basically all the sports. And so, it's not worth bringing in your athletes if one of them gets sick and then you get sued for it, basically. Right?
No, and you're absolutely right. And in terms of other levels of amateur football too, there we saw Rod Peterson on Twitter report today that the CJFL season was going to be a go come September. I can tell you, as much as I love Rod, he's incorrect on that one. I worked some of my sources today from my days of CJFL play-by-play guy, and I can tell you that the CJFL right now is looking at a lot of what Rod said is correct. They would be an Alberta conference and a Manitoba-Saskatchewan conference with all the games within those, minus a potential championship possibly. But right now I can tell you there are no firm plans. But the PFC is looking at an October start, and that is if they can get permission from the Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta governments, and if cases stay low. So basically, the point we're at now where cases have essentially been in decline, minus one outbreak here in Saskatchewan up north. If that maintains, we may see CJFL and PFC football come October.
Yeah.
Which which again, I have actual source and actual news. It's rare that I don't just bullshit on this thing.
That's why I was so speechless right there. I really didn't know what to say.
I sounded like a professional for once.
Is your vehicle stopping like it should? Does it squeal or grind when you brake? Don't miss out on summer brake deals at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly.